I never imagined that my life could change so drastically in just one day. For years, I've been a disciplined man, devoted to what I believed was true spirituality. My name is Noah Caldwell. I'm 47 years old and have been a pastor for over 20 years, always teaching that faith without sacrifice is empty faith. I grew up in a Christian household, surrounded by lessons about obedience to God, and I learned early that fasting was one of the most powerful tools a Christian could have. But not just any fasting. From a young age, I heard about great men of God in the Bible who deprived themselves for 40 days to receive the tablets of the law. Jesus fasted for 40 days before beginning his ministry. Elijah, Daniel, Nehemiah, all these great men of faith fasted to receive God's guidance. It made a deep impression on me. I remember the first time I did an extended fast. I was 21, searching for answers from God about my purpose. I fasted for 7 days, only drinking water, and when it was over, I felt euphoric, as if I had connected to something supernatural. At that moment, I made a vow to myself. I would always teach about the power of fasting and encourage others to do it as well. Time went by, and at 24, I was ordained as a pastor. My sermons focused on one idea: those who want more of God must let go of the world. And for me, fasting was the most powerful way to connect with heaven. I encouraged my church to fast for long periods. Some people went days without eating, and I took pride in that. To me, it was a true symbol of faith. The harder the fast, the more God would be pleased. I would always say, if your fast doesn't hurt, it's worth nothing. I truly believed that. Years passed and my church grew. My name began to be recognized, and people came to me to learn about the spiritual power of fasting. I wrote books on the topic, held conferences, and counseled thousands. My life revolved around this, but at the same time, something started to happen. I felt my body growing weaker. My fasts became more extreme, and my wife, Emily, started to warn me. Noah, you're going too far. You're always tired and irritable. This isn't normal. But I didn't listen. I thought it was an attack from the enemy. I always replied to her with the same verse: the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. To me, physical discomfort was proof that I was on the right path. But something inside me began to weigh heavily. I saw people fasting for long periods, yet without any transformation in their lives. Some would relapse into sin shortly after, while others grew proud, considering themselves superior for fasting longer than others. This troubled me, but I pushed the thought aside. Until one day, everything changed. It was a summer Saturday, sunny and hot. My family and I decided to take a day off at a lake near our home. For me, this was rare because I never took time to relax. I was always studying, praying, or counseling people. I was tired but happy. The water reflected the golden sun. My children were running by the lake, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a momentary relief from the pressure I carried every day. But it was at that moment that tragedy struck. I walked to the edge of the lake to grab some equipment I had left near the water. I barely noticed the sky quickly darkening. A strong wind suddenly blew, whipping up dust and making the trees sway. I heard my wife scream something, but I couldn't understand. It all happened too fast. A bright flash overtook my vision, followed by a deafening noise. My entire body shook. I felt an electric shock surge through every muscle, and then absolute silence. I fell to the ground, lifeless. My wife ran to me, screaming my name. My children were crying, desperate. My heart had stopped, but I wasn't there, because at that moment, I was witnessing something I never imagined I would experience. I felt no pain. There was no final gasp, no last despair, no cry for help, Just silence. The electric shock coursed through my body like lightning cutting through the sky. In 1 second, I was there standing in the lake, breathing, alive. In the next, I no longer belonged to that world. The first thing I felt was a strange sensation, as if a tremendous weight had been lifted from me. I couldn't hear my wife's cries or my children's screams, but I saw them moving desperately around me. It was then I realized I was standing, yet I was also lying on the ground. My body lay there, motionless and pale. My wife held my head, shaking it vigorously, trying to bring me back. I saw her lips moving. I saw the desperation in her eyes, but I couldn't hear a thing. It was as if I were behind thick glass, watching everything happen, but unable to interact. A coldness swept through me. It was a new sensation, something I had never felt before. I tried to speak. I tried to touch my wife's shoulder, but my hand passed right through her as if I were made of air. I wasn't breathing, but I didn't need to. I felt no fatigue, no hunger, no thirst, just an eerie lightness, like floating in a dream I couldn't wake up from. People around me were running. The sound of ambulance sirens grew louder, but I stayed there, standing still, watching a world that suddenly felt so distant. Then I noticed something even stranger. The daylight, which had been bright moments before, began to change. It was as if everything around me was growing hazy, the colors fading like an old photograph. At the same time, another light appeared. It didn't come from the sun or any visible source. It was a soft, golden glow, yet bright enough to command my full attention. I felt something inside me drawn to that light. It was an irresistible feeling, as if the light had its own magnetism, a silent call pulling me toward it. There was no fear or anxiety, just a strange certainty that I had to go there. My body, or whatever part of me existed then, began to move on its own. There was no ground, no air, but I was being pulled toward that presence. The lake, the trees, my wife, my children, all started to fade away bit by bit. The only thing left was that light. Then I felt a presence, something greater, something beyond explanation. It was as if everything I knew, everything I had learned, all the words I had ever spoken, were too small compared to what was before me. A voice echoed inside me without sound, yet with a power that fully penetrated me. It was like thunder in absolute silence. My name was spoken without a sound, yet it resonated deep within. And then the light began to take shape. I couldn't see a face, but I knew exactly who it was. I stood before the one I had spoken about my entire life, the one I had preached about from the pulpits, the one I had mentioned in my prayers, the one I had called upon during my fasts. But there in front of him, everything felt different. And in that moment, as I found myself in his presence, one thing struck me like lightning. I was about to discover that not everything I believed was truly the truth. The voice not only called to me, it knew me. Every thought, every mistake, every truth, and every lie I had told myself. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew vanished. My body or my soul, or whatever it was, leaned in on its own. I didn't know if it was possible to cry in that place, but if it were, I would have. Then everything around me changed. The light around me began to expand, and suddenly I was no longer alone. In front of me, something came to light that no words could describe. The sky, but not as I had imagined. I had spent my life preaching about it, talking about streets of gold, pearly gates, a place where there was no pain or suffering. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what I was witnessing. The space was infinite, yet personal at the same time. It was as if everything was alive, in motion. The air, if it could even be called that, carried a peace so absolute that it passed through me like a breeze. There were no shadows, but there wasn't a single point of light coming from a specific place. There were sounds, but not like those of earth. It was music, but not one that could be played with instruments. Every note was a vibration, and every melody was a conversation. There were no words, but I understood everything. I saw beings, not like the angels I had always imagined. They were made of pure light, as if every part of them was woven from something I could never describe. Their forms were indescribable, yet I knew they were real. I felt love, not just love as we know it, but a love that had weight, that was almost physical. And then I heard the voice again. "What did you expect to find here?" The question took me by surprise. Everything I thought I understood about heaven felt childish in the face of the vastness of that place. I wanted to speak, but I didn't know what to say. Then everything changed again. The light around me began to shape itself, and before me, images started to emerge. But they weren't images of joy, they were images of myself. I saw myself preaching, teaching about fasting, speaking with conviction, encouraging people to make increasingly extreme sacrifices. I saw myself at the pulpit saying words that, in that moment, felt strange, distant, as if they had not been spoken by me. And then I saw something even worse. I saw the people listening to me. I saw their exhausted faces, eyes filled with doubt, their weakened bodies. I saw a man who tried to fast for so many days that his body couldn't handle it anymore. I saw a woman who lost her faith because she believed she could never reach the level of spirituality I preached about. I saw young people punishing themselves, trying to prove to God that they were worthy, when all God wanted was a sincere heart. And then I understood, and before I could react, the voice spoke again. "Did you fast for me, or did you fast for yourself?" I felt shame. A weight pierced me, as if every word I had ever preached had become a burden on my shoulders. I saw the face of every person who heard me, each anxious gaze waiting for an answer, each hand raised in desperation, seeking a miracle through extreme sacrifice. And then the voice echoing inside me grew even more resolute. "Did you fast for me, or did you fast for yourself?" I thought I was fasting for God. I believed I was teaching what was right, but there, before the one who saw, beyond words, beyond intentions, beyond appearances, I realized there was something deeper I had never understood. I fasted to be heard, to feel powerful, to teach others that sacrifice was the only way to reach God. But what if I was wrong? I trembled, as if it were possible to feel cold in that place. I had always believed fasting was a divine code, a key that unlocked something special, something only the strong could attain. I had always seen rigorous fasts as a sign of spiritual maturity, a seal that distinguished the truly faithful from the weak in faith. So finally I asked, "Lord, what is true fasting?" The silence was filled with something that felt like wind, but it wasn't wind. It was a presence that moved, spoke without words, and enveloped me without touching. "Have you read Isaiah 58? The question struck me like lightning. Of course I had read it many times before, but at that moment, those words came back to me, as if I was hearing them for the first time. Isn't this the fast I have chosen? To loose the chains of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke. But I had never seen it quite like I did then. The true fast isn't about food. The true fast is about surrender, about the heart, about liberation. Then, like a scroll unfurling before me, I saw other people, other churches, other nations, different traditions. I saw those who fasted by eating only vegetables. I saw those who did partial fasts. I saw those who gave up something they loved as a form of sacrifice. I saw Catholics during Lent. I saw evangelicals in fasting campaigns. I saw Jews on Yom Kippur. I saw Muslims during Ramadan, and amidst that vision, one thought gripped my mind. Who is right? My heart raced because the answer came even before I could finish the question. Everyone, as long as they do it with a surrendered heart, as long as it's not for vanity, as long as the fast isn't a burden but a channel of connection, as long as the purpose isn't self-exaltation but surrender. What God wanted was never the hunger of men, never the suffering of the body. What he has always desired is the transformation of the soul. It was as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes, as if all that time I had looked for the answer, but never truly saw it. Then Jesus said something I will never forget. The Father looks at the heart, not the sacrifice. I would have to return. The moment I was pulled back felt like falling from a great height with nothing to hold on to. The light around me vanished in an instant, and suddenly, everything became heavy again. My body, once light as a breath, now felt like it was made of lead. I felt an overwhelming weight in my lungs, a deep coldness, and a distant sound, something that gradually began to take shape. Voices, machines, beeping. My eyes were closed, but I was back. I heard my wife crying, felt hands gripping me, a strong pressure on my chest. Then, with a jolt of reality, air rushed into my lungs at once, and I convulsed violently. The pain was immediate. I was alive. The doctors around me began shouting, moving quickly. I couldn't quite make out what they were saying. My eyes slowly opened, and the first thing I saw was the white ceiling, the bright lights blinding my vision. My heart was pounding. I heard my wife calling my name, sobbing. I felt her fingers gripping my hand, her face resting on my shoulder, but I was still in shock. My spirit felt displaced, as if my soul hadn't fully returned to my body. The experience still burned within me. What I had seen, what I had heard, it was all still vivid in my mind, as if it had happened just moments ago. I could still sense the presence of the one who found me. But then, another feeling began to spread. How could I explain this? How could I look into my wife's eyes and tell her that I had died and met Jesus? How could I say that he showed me I had spent years preaching an incomplete truth? How could I admit that what I taught about fasting, what I believed was the foundation of spiritual life, wasn't everything I thought it was? Confusion overwhelmed me. The doctors started asking questions, but my mind was elsewhere. Do you know where you are? Do you remember what happened? I simply shook my head. That wasn't the issue. The issue was how I would tell the world what I had learned. The days that followed were strange. My body was recovering, but my soul was still caught between two worlds. I couldn't sleep properly. I woke in the middle of the night, flashes of what I had seen running through my mind. I relived Jesus' words, "The Father sees the heart, not the sacrifice," and it haunted me. I knew I had to speak out. I knew I had a mission, but I also knew that as soon as I opened my mouth, everything would change. To everyone around me, I was still Pastor Noah Caldwell. But inside, I was completely different. On the first Sunday after my recovery, I returned to church. As soon as I walked in, I was met with emotion. People hugged me, telling me they had prayed for me, that my survival was a miracle. And I knew it was. But when I stepped up to the pulpit and looked at those people who had trusted me for so many years, my heart felt heavy. I took a deep breath and began to speak, and then silence fell. The expressions changed. I shared my experience, revealing what I witnessed and what Jesus showed me about the true fast of the heart. I explained that God isn't impressed by long fasts, but by sincere hearts. It wasn't about physical sacrifice, but about inner transformation. The reaction was startling. People exchanged glances, some bowed their heads, while others looked at me as if I had lost my mind. One of the church leaders raised his hand, interrupting me. "Pastor Noah, are you saying that all this time we've been preaching wrongly?" My mouth went dry. "I'm saying there is something greater than this, that God desires more than just physical sacrifice." A murmur spread. I saw closed expressions and suspicious looks. After the service, I was called to a meeting with the church council. They asked me to clarify. "Pastor, what exactly are you trying to say? That all the fasts we've done were meaningless?" "No, I'm saying that fasting without a transformed heart is meaningless." The leader sighed. "That's not what you've always preached." And he was right. That's when I realized I was treading unfamiliar ground. In the weeks that followed, resistance grew. People didn't welcome the change. Many members began leaving, accusing me of watering down the message, weakening the church, and contradicting everything I had always taught. My reputation slowly unraveled. What had once been admiration turned to doubt. Then came the final blow. The church council asked me to take some time to reflect and reconsider, but I already understood what that meant. My time there was over. My wife cried as we left. I didn't know what to do. I had lost everything, yet something inside me burned. I knew my mission wasn't finished. The life I had known was over. There was no church, no pulpit, no crowds waiting eagerly for my words. What had once been my security, my pride, and my legacy was now just a distant memory. I had been forgotten by those who once followed me. But for the first time, I was free. In the first days after leaving the church, I felt lost. I wondered if I had truly understood Jesus' message, or if it had all been a delusion of my mind. But every time I felt weak, the same voice echoed inside me. "The Father sees the heart, not the sacrifice." That phrase sustained me when everyone else had abandoned me. My wife, Emily, was my rock amid all the chaos. She was the one who reminded me that I was still alive, that I still had a calling. "You were called to teach the truth, not to be accepted." And I knew she was right. In the months that followed, I began studying the Bible like never before. Before, I read it to confirm what I already believed. Now, I read to discover what God truly wanted to teach me. Isaiah 58 never left my mind. The true fast is one that loosens the bonds of wickedness, undoes heavy burdens, sets the oppressed free, and breaks every yoke. Fasting wasn't about physical deprivation. It was about spiritual liberation. It wasn't about what you give up eating, but what you leave behind. And there, alone, without the spotlight, without recognition, I began to live my faith in a completely different way. That's when something unexpected happened. I started receiving messages from people who had left the church, people who felt lost and were searching for purpose. Some were former members of my flock, but others were complete strangers. They asked me about fasting, about faith, about God, and I began to teach. Not like before, not with promises of power, not with demands for sacrifice, but with the simple truth that Jesus revealed to me. The Father sees the heart. Over time, a new ministry began to take shape. Small groups formed. People gathered to learn about a God who does not require suffering, but true surrender. I never went back to being the pastor I was before, and I'm grateful for that. Today, I live more simply. My faith isn't measured by how many days I go without something, but by how deeply I allow myself to be transformed. If I could go back in time and talk to the Noah I once was, I'd tell him to stop trying to impress God with his effort and just surrender right. But maybe I had to go through all of this to understand. Now I ask you, how is your heart? Have you ever wondered if you're fasting only with your body or truly surrendering your soul? Leave your comment. I want to hear your thoughts. If this story made you reflect, then you need to watch this other video. There you'll see another transformative experience that can change your view on faith and eternity.